All right, it's a time for another episode of Ask the Experts. I'm Jill Schlesinger, the editor-at-large at CBSMoneyWatch.com. Two very special guest stars here today. MoneyWatch blogger Dan Kadlec, who has been kind enough to provide us with all sorts of information about how to make our kids smarter. And that's been fabulous, by the way.
Very important stuff.
Indeed. And not that you're not really the important star, but you're totally not today. John Rogers Jr. I got to put the junior in. Hold on. I got to do the whole bio. First of all, he's so important. He was appointed last year by President Obama to chair the President's Advisory Council on Financial Capability. He's a founder, chairman, and chief investment officer of Ariel Investments, Chicago-based money management firm. He's a board member for a zillion different places. He was an all-star fund manager by USA Today. He's all over the place. He is super duper financial star, but indeed your proudest sort of celebratory thing that keeps coming up in bios is that you played basketball at Princeton. Is that right?
It was a great experience.
That's it. Is that your resume builder right there?
Well, it changed my life. Coach Krill changed my life.
That's kind of cool. I mean, that really is, right?
I think, didn't you once dunk on Michael Jordan?
No, I didn't dunk on Michael Jordan, but I beat him 3-2 in a short game at his fantasy camp, and no camper had ever beat him before. So it's been a thrill to have it on YouTube and the rest.
Yeah.
And it's been downhill ever since, right? That was it. I reached the pinnacle of my sports career right then and there. That'd be pretty cool. So, John, one of the reasons we wanted to have you on today was to talk a little bit about your role in this kind of post-financial crisis in terms of how are we going to make Americans more responsible about their financial lives? How are we going to get them more involved in this? It's a pretty big task. So how do you start dealing with it?
It is a huge task. And sometimes it almost feels overwhelming because there's so many programs, so many initiatives, so many websites all around financial literacy. And I think part of the challenge is to really try to, narrow it down to the ones that are really terrific, that are making a difference, and then making them available for a much broader cross-section of America.
And what do you think? I mean, so what is that? I mean, I would always think, as the former financial advisor, the easiest way in is through a retirement plan, right? Because pretty much everybody has to, we hope, is going to retire. What can we do to kind of beef up education? Because a lot of the companies say, hey, we don't want to get involved in that. We don't want to give advice. We don't want, and then the employees say, well, we don't want the fund sponsor coming in. We don't want some guy from Fidelity to come in or do this. We need some unbiased support. So how can we help that happen?
Well, we're working on that. Carrie Schwab Pomerantz is on our commission. And she has a lot of ideas about ways at the work site to educate Americans and get them the right habits, the right instincts. Also, I'm on the board of directors of McDonald's, and they've done a terrific job under their human resources director, Rich Flourish, to try to find ways to reach the employees directly as well as through the employee networks and hitting all the diverse constituents of McDonald's to make sure they're educated and prepared for retirement.
My thing is more about the kids. I think there's plenty being done at the workplace, and it seems to me that the whole effort now under the new administration is to reach out to adults who may already be in trouble and have these sort of outreach programs and sort of more education of an older segment or an underserved segment. But what about reaching the kids while they're in school? I got to ask you, there's a lot of literature now that says financial literacy education in the schools just doesn't work. I don't buy it, but there are people that say that, and I know that you actually you've endowed a school that's doing this. And do you see evidence that it works, that it can be taught?
We think we think we do have great evidence, and it's kind of interesting. And that's part of the reason I think I was appointed to this new commission by the president, because our school's at 46th and Greenwood, and his home in Chicago is at 50th and Greenwood, 51st and Greenwood, just 5 blocks away. So he was very aware of what we were doing. Also, he was aware of it because his Secretary of Education, Arnie Duncan, created the school with us at Ariel 14 years ago. And so far, it's off to a terrific start. And I think the difference is that we're making sure that kids have real money to invest. So starting in first grade, every class gets a class gift from Ariel and John Nuveen of $20,000. And we manage it for the first 6 years. And then, we're showing them age-appropriate statements, getting them engaged and involved with all the terminology around investing and getting comfortable with it. But then in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, we turn the money over to the kids, and they start to make real stock decisions with real money. And I think that exposure of making it real, it really helps a lot with the education.
Is there any evidence that what they learn helps them later on in life to make sound decisions about their credit cards and their mortgage and all that kind of stuff?
Well, it's a little early for us. Our oldest kids now from the school starting 14 years ago are now sophomores in college. And we have some terrific success stories of kids. Two of our kids have been the Money Smart Kid of the Year from the Federal Reserve Board, where you have to get interviewed and write an essay, and so that's shown really great success. But also our Ariel Community Academy Public School has had great test scores, particularly in math. And we think that we have to learn about P ratios and compound interest and all the rest. It strengthens your math skills. So we think that's the real life example of how it's helping.
And before you get to that point, though, I mean, are you teaching rudimentary, how to balance a checkbook, or, what is debt? And because we're sort of concerned that we're graduating, millions and millions of kids that really don't know basic financial fundamentals.
Well, this is a work in progress. And like a lot of us, we all learned what we didn't know through the financial crisis,
right.
All about how to make sure you have the right mortgage for yourself and all the rest. So as we've been learning and evolving, we are working hard now with our teachers to get a dynamic curriculum that'll be better, new, improved, that will help kids with all the basics they need and getting them comfortable at that early age. Because I think it's just like learning a language. If you get comfortable early, you'll make better decisions because you'll be so comfortable in the marketplace. But you're right. We've had to learn that we have to expand the things that we're going to be teaching the kids about.
Yeah. And I think that the challenge, of course, is if you've got somebody who is, already on the path of some pretty bad behavior, to undo that behavior and now go back and teach that person or reteach. Let's start with layups. We're not going to run these, sophisticated plays before we learn how to shoot our layups and do some foul shots. How do we get to that place? I mean, it's so daunting.
It really is. And I just think that, you have to immerse the kids in this world. And, I tell people all the time, when in high school I had to take French every year. And then at Princeton I took 3 semesters. I think it was mandatory. And I've spoken about 3 French words since I graduated.
Say them right now.
I know I can. But
Je m'appelle Jean.
That's about all I know. And my daughter jokes with me about it. But if you think about it, we need to learn these real life skills at an early age and have more energy and effort put into that. Because again, you have to be in charge of your own 401k plan now. When you get that first job, as you alluded to earlier, you've got to get in at the right time, not take a loan at the wrong time, not get too much in your company stock, and move the funds around. That's an enormous amount of responsibility that today's investor has that they didn't have to worry about 30 years ago when they were retiring from General Motors.
With a pension.
Right.
Hello.
So, John, tell me if I'm wrong here, but my sense of the direction that we're taking in financial education today is that we're dumbing it down, is that when 5-10 years ago, under the Bush administration anyway, it was all about the ownership society. I mean, George Bush said, I want our kids to grow up owning assets and managing assets. And that seemed like kind of a lofty goal to me. And ultimately it may have failed because as the recession came and people didn't know what they were doing and it all came home. But it seems now that the new angle is to really dumb things down and let's just focus on teaching people, kids, the difference between take-home pay and gross pay, and how to get a decent cell phone plan. And it almost seems too simple to me. I wonder, are we giving up and maybe giving up too early just because we don't have solid evidence that we can actually teach kids in school about money?
Well, I think that's a great point. Because I'm a professional stock picker, that's my life's work. I'm constantly reminding all the folks that care about financial literacy that understanding the stock market and understanding, how to pick and choose funds and all that is critically important. And you can do it at a young age. My father started buying stocks for me every birthday and every Christmas after I was 12 instead of toys. And the great decision he made was that every quarter I would get the dividend checks. They were small, from Commonwealth Edison or General Motors or IBM or what have you. But, geez, I was getting a real check in the mail based upon my equity ownership in these giant companies. And so you put it all together. I had to have a checking account, and I had to know the markets, how the markets worked.
Do you think there needs to be some federal mandate, from the administration? This is what needs to be taught in the schools. And this is, by the way, this is part of your work on the council. I mean, you're advising the president on this stuff, and how many meetings have you been at now? 2 or?
We've had one in-person meeting, and then I've had several conference calls with our subcommittee chairs and the staff at Treasury. And
now, I know that, Arnie Duncan has said there will be no federal mandate. Do you agree with that?
There will be no, you said?
There will be no federal mandate to teach money in school.
But I think that's because, if I may interrupt, isn't that because that you have to, each district has a curriculum that the union is negotiating. And when I did work with Jumpstart, which is a terrific organization based in D.C., which, is really an advocacy organization for financial literacy in the schools, the response that they got was a tremendous amount of pushback from all these unions who said, I don't want to teach an extra class. What is that? That's not my job. So I'm not sure that can be federally mandated if each district, right?
Yeah, I think that's right. And it's not only the labor issue, but also, local school councils, local school boards, local, county governments. Everybody feels a proprietary ownership in the local curriculum.
Right.
And it's sort of from a governance standpoint, it's hard for federal government to mandate to local communities.
And I understand it's a state issue. Education is a state issue. Right. But maybe we need to change that. Maybe we need something from. We need to do something, right?
Dan wants a revolution. He's not into evolution.
Well, Arnie is passionate about this, and he understands that people have to be financially literate if they're going to be able to succeed and be successful after they get through public education. But there are certain things around the Constitution, I think, that might be hard for the secretary.
If Dan and I can beat you and Arnie at 2-on-2, do you think that we can make this happen or not?
Wait a minute. But that's not going to happen.
But I think that'd be impossible.
You got to spot us 10 points.
I know.
In an 11-point
I had
game.
Arnie on my team. I'd spot a lot of people.
Really?
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Let me turn to a different topic here. How is your commission interacting with Elizabeth Warren and the Financial Protection Bureau?
I know the staff at Treasury has been talking to her staff, and I've been talking to various people in Washington about setting up a meeting in the next several weeks so I can brief her on what we're doing and hear what her interests are. And I know that's very important that we share best ideas and best practices.
But you are two separate organizations. What is the mandate that you have versus? She actually has to build an entire agency, right? So, but what is your mandate?
Well, our mandate, we're talking to all of, the subcommittee chairs to define the mandate more closely. But the idea is to give the president some concrete ideas. We're hoping, our dream is to have 2 or 3 specific ideas that we can give to the president that will transform this area where there's been so many different attempts and so many opportunities to try to, move this ball down the field. And I think at times it hasn't gotten as far as a lot of people have hoped. There's been a lot of frustration. So we want to have some clear, simple, direct ideas that the president can execute around and really move this important initiative forward.
What are you tackling first?
Well, we have 5 subcommittees, and they each have their own initiatives. But I think some of the things that we're talking about already is, building partnerships. Carrie Schwab's committee is very engaged and involved in that. And we think that's so important, getting the private sector partnering with the public sector to help on this, but also thinking through again how we can have one place that if you're a family and you need advice for your job, or for your kids getting ready to save for college or buying that first home or whatever, you'd have one common place where you could go to get world-class information and ideas that would make it simple and easy to understand how to execute around it.
A website, a government-run website.
Those are the kind of things,
tools.
We haven't, this is still early. We've only had this one meeting, but those are the kind of ideas and tools that will be talked about.
Right.
And then your idea of working and trying to get more and more public education engaged in this issue. I think that is critical, how we can encourage that.
One of the things that is fascinating me is that the Brookings Institution just in the last few days came out with a whole report on financial literacy, and they're skeptical as well, but they say one thing that might help is a national ad campaign, kind of like wear seatbelts, don't smoke, don't litter, and do you think that are we going to see something like that in the next year or two?
Well, those are the kind of ideas that we will be talking through in detail and getting public engagement and public ideas around it. But for someone who's lived this now since I was 12 years old, it's really 40 years, I think it's so critical we find a way to reach people and let them know how important this issue is. So your idea is something that I know will be explored in a lot of detail.
Now, let's shift gears a second, because you know what? You're a captain of industry. So you are, in essence, like one of those big, huge, rich dudes that Main Street America is like, why would I trust this guy? He seems like a nice guy. He's a good basketball player. But how can consumers who really were unprepared for the financial crisis, as many institutions were, how can they be won back? Because the institutions in which they had so much trust, their local banks, their mutual fund companies, their advisors themselves, they shredded the trust. So what has to happen to win back the trust? And you, on behalf of the entire financial services industry, have a chance to change that right now.
Well, one of the things I know, I have had a lot of great experiences because I was a stockbroker before I became a mutual fund manager. We have this small public school of 500 students. It's right in the heart of the inner city of Chicago, where it's kids and families who are engaged in all the challenges that we face in today's economy. And I'm there with those kids, helping them think through how to get prepared for their futures from a financial literacy standpoint. I just left the Rainbow Push Wall Street Project convention, and I've spent a lot of time with Reverend Jackson and his staff of trying to reach nationally folks that haven't been as fortunate as maybe I have. So I think that hopefully I bring this kind of a passion. And also I used to be on the Investment Company Institute board and the NESD board. And so I've seen it from a regulatory standpoint and from an industry standpoint. So I think maybe when the president chose me for this leadership role, he realized that I brought a real cross-section of experiences and experiences with people of all different walks of life in our economy. And hopefully he knows that I have a passion for making sure that, again, younger people get this exposure that they need.
Do you think that he needs a tall Jewish girl who's a decent basketball player also? Because I'm ready to volunteer for you right now. But, I'm going to be demanding, because I feel like the industry, and I come from the industry, I'm part of it, I get it. My dad was a specialist on the floor of the American Stock Exchange, and I was an investment advisor. I think the industry has really let down the public. I really do. I feel very strongly that there are too many times where they put short-term profit ahead of long-term stability. And, there's very few fund families like yours where you say, hey, you know what? You better be patient or don't come in here. Or, we're a different kind of organization. Mm-hmm. There's too much of like this quick money marketing. And I feel very strongly that if we're going to make some really radical changes, that some organization, whether it's a government organization or a fund family, has to stop saying we're pumping up our performance, buy us because we went up. You know what? Take control of your financial life, and that's how you're going to find great performance.
Well, one thing I'm hopeful about, and at the Schwab conference this year, where we were the marquee sponsor, Melody Hobson, our president, and I spoke at a panel about this, and there were dozens of advisors who came and then followed up and said, we want to create a small school in our communities, or we want to volunteer in our local community. Uh-huh. We want to find a way to be helpful and supportive. So I think people just need more and more advisors, and others need the tools. And people like yourself who are willing to help and volunteer, you bring this expertise, and it makes all the difference. And then I do think it is something that we have to let the overall financial industry more exposed to, how important it is to get these less fortunate investors, less wealthy investors involved and included.
Yeah, because there's no doubt right now that we have a retirement crisis looming. We have, baby boomers who are retiring, which is one group of people. But, you look at the younger baby boomers, and they have saved so little for retirement on average. And I'm not saying that this is easy, but we have a serious problem on our hands.
It's so interesting you say that. The New York Times did a cover story several years ago with the headline was, "We regret to inform you that you're not going to be able to retire." And I think that our society has no understanding of this change from defined benefit pension plans to this new defined contribution world.
Yeah, because they got screwed. Because they were like sitting there in the late 70s, really happy, working hard, doing their thing, getting pensions. And then this beautiful marketing explosion happened of the 401k and companies. I don't blame it. Like, I was a for-profit company. If I didn't have to have the burden of funding my employees' retirement, why not put it on them? But nobody gave people the tools at that moment.
It's critical. And, it's what's happening in our state governments now because, here, in Illinois, it's public. We have these huge pension deficits, and a lot of the business leadership is saying, you got to, move it into a defined contribution plan, get rid of the pension plan or, change it or move it around. And they're not then taking the next step that you suggest. You've got to make sure if you're going to do that, that you've created the financial tools and the financial education so those employees will be able to make the right decisions to be able to retire comfortably. I think this really is a disaster in the making, and you're not going to find out until 10, 20, 30 years from now. And again, people who are people of color, women, and others who often didn't have the exposure to the financial markets growing up, they're going to be the ones that are going to be punished the worst.
Right.
See, but this all gets back to financial education again. You mentioned some publication, but I wrote a cover story for Time about it, why we're all going to work till we're 80, and that was like 5 years ago. But there's really been this sort of real awareness that's taken place, in the last 10 or 15 years, maybe, or even shorter than that. One of the things I did in my blog is I charted the terms. Google's got this new tool now where you can chart terms, published terms going back, 200 years, and I charted the term on your own and the term Social Security, and you can see how they cross. And just since like 1980, Social Security is going like this, and on your own is rising. And so I think it's really the perfect picture of what's happening in this country, and people coming to grips with, I'm going to be on my own. The social safety net is gone, and this is kind of what we were just talking about. It's going to be even worse. That trend's not going away, and it's gonna. Our kids are going to see it even more than we do. They need these skills, and yet we still have such confusion over how to give it to them, and that's really what we're trying to figure out, isn't it? I mean, isn't the state of teaching kids about money, where is it right now? It seems to me in mass confusion to me. We've tried some things, they haven't worked, and now we don't know where to go, and that's kind of what you are being asked to figure out.
Yeah, no, you're right. It's a crisis. And, the other way I know it's a crisis, I've been fortunate to serve on a lot of boards, nonprofit, universities, hospitals, as well as corporate boards. And, of course, I'm a professional investor. And whenever I ask a CFO, have you really thought about this potential crisis of your employee base not being prepared to retire because of the movement toward defined contribution? Every single time they've said, we really have not spent much time thinking about this and have never actually looked at the data to see how much money are in the accounts by race and by sex, and to see how prepared that community will be to be able to retire comfortably.
The real solution, isn't it to teach the generation that hasn't made the mistakes yet? I mean, our generation's made a lot of mistakes, and we're just trying to catch up.
Wait a minute. Why did you just lump me in with your generation, dude? Are you kidding me? Come on now. You mean your generation?
I'm a very young man.
Wait a second. Before you get on that, I agree. I am totally in favor of putting financial literacy in every single school system's curriculum. I really am. However, we have millions of people today who need help. And I feel like if we're going to do triage, we're going to have to deal with those folks. And you're right, it is absolutely those people who have fewer resources. But it's not even that. I mean, we have a group of people called, quote unquote, middle America that has not had a wage gain in 10 years and whose house just went down in value by 30% from the top and whose 401k got decimated. And we have got to figure out what we're going to do to help them get back on their feet. And I think that that's kind of what you're saying, which is we got to kind of start off with the tip of that iceberg, right? Right.
It's so critical. Even my cousin, gave up at the bottom in March of 2009.
Your cousin.
Right. And as much as I had talked to her and worked with her, and so ultimately as we came out of that and are up 200% from the market lows, she missed out on all of that because she got fearful when everyone else was fearful, as Warren Buffett talks about. And, it's so important. We not only teach the statistics and all the data about financial literacy, but you also have to have that sense of some of these core values that people like Warren talk about, where you understand that, if you're greedy when everyone else is greedy, you're fearful when everyone else is fearful, you're never going to be successful.
Yeah, but part of that, of course, is trying to make sure that people don't have so much risk. So even if you are fearful that your account hasn't gone down by 80% in total, right? That you say, right, that you're more diversified and we're teaching those concepts. Now, my boss, who is on our chat room right now, go to moneywatch.com for our chat room, wants to know, would Medicare or Medicaid be vehicles for financial education for lower income folks? Do you think that there is a place there that we could kind of incorporate that or use some of the institutions that are already in place? Now, say something nice because it's my boss.
I know. So I have to say that's something we have.
That's a brilliant idea, Stephen.
So far, I have not heard that come up yet. So that's something we have to put into our arsenal to look into and get more information about how that could work.
You know what? You're kind of like a politician. You're unbelievable. You're like, yeah, whatever. We should totally get task force. Let's get a task force. Let's get a study group on that.
By the way, Jill, here's a stat or two that just I have to say. 21% of individuals say that winning the lottery is their only shot at putting together a savings of several $100,000. 16% they think it's the best option for most Americans, winning the lottery. So you talk about a need for understanding how money works. This is what we're faced with.
No, I'm embarrassed to say I did win $10,000 in the instant lottery when I was in college.
Whoa, hold on. What'd you do with it? You bought a stock.
I did. I went right to my broker's office in the corner.
Geek. You are. Is it true? Wait a second. Is it true that you were making phone calls from the gym to your stockbroker when you were in college? I read that in one article, I think in Smart Money magazine.
If I was there early, and in those days you had to pay phone.
Oh my God, this is crazy. Okay, here's a question from someone in our chat room who wants to know. It's so great that you're looking into this. But when do you think you're going to actually do something? When will there be action here? I feel like people need to see progress and feel that does give them hope that they can dig themselves out and take control of their financial lives. When do you think we can get something going?
Well, hopefully, our council is sort of a reconstituted council from the one that Chuck Schwab chaired during the Bush administration. And so the federal legislation gives us, or the president's goal is that we have a 2-year time horizon to get this done. And we're committed to having something that is really meaningful and transformative after that 2-year period.
You think this clearinghouse, this website is going to be the thing? I mean, because it would be great to have one spot to go for, non-sponsored, good financial information.
Well, as I said earlier, I think it's a tremendous idea and thought. I don't want to get out in front of my fellow subcommittee chairs and council members, as well as there's a huge amount of public interest, both in the broad government as well as individuals around the country. So we want to make sure we get all the feedback before we end up with the firm conclusions.
Right. By the way, something like that sort of exists, right? Is it the Treasury has something called mymoney.gov or something? I should check that before I say it. But
yes,
so there's sort of a framework, and there's something there to start with.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, we're going to come to a close here, but I want to ask you a couple of questions. Number one, totally off topic. I like to freak you out a little bit. So you come here and it's like the opposite of going on television. We don't tell you anything. We don't expect you to say anything. So number one, how's Princeton's basketball team this year?
They're doing very well. I'm looking forward to going to a game in a few weeks.
Really? Do you think that they can beat the Brown Bears?
I
doubt
think
that.
so. No, we're the favorites to win the league.
Whatever. So boring.
Bring them
More,
to the Big East and see what happens.
Yeah. Well, okay. More important question. Do you believe that company stock belongs in retirement plans?
Oh, wow. I think it's fair to have everything there for the employees. That's off the top of, my instinct is you want to have everyone have a chance to see everything, but they need to have good advice and counsel to understand that it's important not to overload and to have as a part of a balanced, diversified portfolio.
How about if ERISA guidelines could you live with if ERISA guidelines were amended to say you can have company stock, but no employee can have more than 5% of company stock of their total?
I'm not sure what the exact number should be, but I do think that wouldn't be a bad idea if there was some guidelines there.
Okay.
Because otherwise, you're right, we've seen the devastation if people do get too much in their company stock.
Are we going to get fee disclosure in retirement accounts, you think, like a more transparent way to understand what's in your company's plan?
I'm sure we will. I know we're moving toward that slowly but surely, but hopefully we do it in a way that people can understand it.
Yep.
And so it's not just too much gobbledygook that doesn't help people make the right decisions and understand the costs.
How about a one-page prospectus for a mutual fund? Is it possible? where people say, this is how much money it pays. This is like a one page that says, this is what you got.
Well, that would be a dream come true. If
Right? You
make
could
it
fire your
sim-
whole compliance department.
Right. Make things simple and easy for people to understand.
Well, how about a statement we can
We've
read?
gone the other way.
Right?
Some of these things have gotten so big, and you read prospectuses on companies going public, and it's just
And that credit card agreement is 6 pages long.
Ridiculous. It's totally ridiculous. Oh, by the way, our producer, Megan, who you met, this lovely blonde woman here, is from the University of Kansas. And so she's laughing at us right now talking about basketball. I just want you to know that. Now, last question. President Obama walked into this job at the worst possible time economically. How comfortable is he really? Give us the inside scoop. Is he like, oh, I don't know anything about economics, and so thank God I'm friends with people who are like you?
the quick thing is, I've known
Say
him,
something good so we can use it.
right.
Headline.
Right. The headline. Right. Well, the headline. His brother-in-law, who I played basketball with at Princeton, is a business leader, and I've had lots of conversation with the president now going on a very long time about economic and small business and the importance of it. And I understand he understands the importance of small business. His brother-in-law had a small business a couple of different times along the way before he became a coach. Also, Valerie Jarrett has been an outstanding business leader in Chicago and a dynamic leader and chairs of so many different boards involved with business. So I know he has a lot of great friends and family and others who have helped get him confident about his economic decision-making.
Is he a better basketball player or economist?
That's not a fair question. I can't answer that.
Is it true that you still eat McDonald's like whatever 100 million times a year?
I try to go every day. I love it there.
Wait a minute. You go every day to McDonald's?
I do.
Do you eat Chicago deep dish pizza?
I do. I have Geno's every Sunday night.
Really? You're a man of, we would say, habit. Is that right?
That's true.
So consistency.
I've been doing, I just do the same things over and over again.
Besides McDonald's, what's the best restaurant in Chicago right now?
Wow, the best restaurant in Chicago.
This is for Megan. She loves to eat.
And beside Geno's,
Yeah.
I like the Food Life restaurants that are in the Water Tower place that are a Melman restaurant chain.
Yeah.
I just love that
Do you know
place.
what we should do is next time you're in New York, how about this? We'll talk a little bit more, but I will take you to the Shake Shack, which is around the corner from our offices here, which is the Danny Meyer restaurant, which is, to me, one of the best burgers in all of New York. So you will sort of say, okay, it'll be like a McDonald's Shake Shack slam. Are you in?
I'm happy to give it a shot.
Right here. All right. So we got to close up now. John Rogers Jr., thank you so much for joining us. You have been a delight, a pleasure. I'm not so sure what a good basketball player you are. His fingers are taped. Who knows? Dan Kadlec, financial blogger extraordinaire, great guy, author. Go check his workout at MoneyWatch.com. Thank you so much for joining us. Bank of Dad. And while I can completely respect that you have to be loyal to Princeton, go Brown Bears. Thank you so much for watching MoneyWatch.com's Ask the Experts. Tune in next week. It'll be a lively show. Take care. Thanks.